Over 90%.
Yeah, that number is just staggering.
It really is. That is the number of perimenopausal and postmenopausal women who have sleep apnea but remain completely undiagnosed. 90%.
It's basically an invisible epidemic.
Exactly. So welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today our mission is to completely reframe how you think about a very common, very frustrating issue.
Right, poor sleep during menopause.
Yeah. We are moving way past that standard tired narrative of, hot flashes keep you awake.
Mm-hmm.
We're uncovering a hidden mechanical truth about how hormonal shifts literally alter the physical structure of the human airway.
And to get to the bottom of this, we are synthesizing a stack of incredibly dense but deeply illuminating sources.
We've got a comprehensive review published in Frontiers in Medicine, the latest clinical guidelines from the British Menopause Society, and hands-on clinical insights from both sleep physicians and dental sleep specialists.
It's a lot of ground to cover, but it's so important.
It is. Usually when you talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision, like engineering.
Right. It's clean, binary.
Exactly. You break your arm, the x-ray shows a jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is. It gives you a clear path forward.
But when you step into the world of women's sleep and menopause, suddenly that x-ray machine is broken.
It really is. We are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky. Patients are suffering from severe physiological changes, but being told it's, well, just a normal part of aging.
Which is why understanding the mechanics of the airway is so vital. We have to start looking at the throat not just as a tube for air, but as a dynamic, hormonally driven structure.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to imagine the hormones in a woman's body are like the structural scaffolding of a building.
Well, that's a great visual.
Right, because we usually just think of hormones like estrogen and progesterone purely in terms of reproduction.
Making babies, regulating menstrual cycles, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. But looking at this Frontiers review, it becomes obvious that they are doing so much more than that.
Yeah.
They are absolutely critical to respiratory health.
Which is a massive blind spot in modern medicine. What's fascinating here is that the male-to-female ratio for sleep apnea before menopause is roughly 2-to-1.
So men are twice as likely to have it early on.
Right. Because women are actively protected by this hormonal scaffolding. If you look closely at the upper airway, progesterone isn't acting as a fertility hormone at all. It's acting as a neurological pacemaker.
Wait, a pacemaker?
Yeah, it has this fascinating dual role. On one hand, progesterone acts as nature's Valium.
So it physically interacts with GABA receptors in the brain to produce a calming effect.
Exactly. It promotes sleep and reduces anxiety. But crucially, at the exact same time, it's a powerful respiratory stimulant.
Wow. Okay, so it calms the brain down, but keeps the breathing system highly alert.
Yes. Down in the brainstem, it interacts with central chemoreceptors. It acts almost like a metronome, constantly sending electrical impulses to the diaphragm and the airway muscles, saying, keep breathing, keep the rhythm strong.
That is a serious physiological balancing act.
Yeah.
So this increased ventilatory drive prevents the throat muscles from relaxing too much and collapsing inward while you sleep.
Right. And then there is estrogen, specifically estradiol.
Yeah, the research points out that estrogen binds directly to something called estrogen receptor alpha, or ER alpha.
And that is densely packed into the genioglossus muscle.
Which is the primary muscle responsible for dilating your upper airway, right?
Exactly. It's essentially the muscle that keeps your tongue pulled forward so it doesn't fall backward and block your throat when you're lying down.
Wait, so my throat muscles are literally relying on ovarian hormones to not collapse? Like, is the airway essentially a hormone-dependent organ?
Basically, yes. Estrogen acts like this muscle's personal trainer.
A personal trainer, I love that.
The data shows that estrogen actively promotes the development of type I slow muscle fibers.
And those are the fatigue-resistant fibers, right?
Yes. So estrogen is literally ensuring that your throat muscles possess Olympic-level endurance so that they don't get tired of holding your airway open for 8 straight hours every single night.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop there. Estrogen also maintains high levels of hyaluronic acid, or HA, in the airway mucosa.
Which we usually hear about in the context of anti-aging skincare.
Right, because it acts like a microscopic sponge, holding onto water to keep skin plump and hydrated.
And inside the airway, it does the exact same thing. It keeps the tissues resilient, firm, and hydrated.
Which prevents friction and acts as a vital structural component to hold the airway walls open.
Exactly. So before menopause, women generally have slightly smaller airways than men. but those airways are actively protected by this high-octane hormonal drive you just described.
Okay, so if estrogen is the muscle's personal trainer and progesterone is the pacemaker, the onset of menopause isn't just a pause in fertility.
No, not at all.
It's the sudden, permanent firing of your airway's entire support staff. So what exactly happens to that genioglossus muscle the week those hormones drop?
Well, the physical breakdown is mathematically staggering.
Like in that Himalayas cohort study we looked at.
Yes, that tracked sleep apnea prevalence, and it showed a massive jump. Once women pass menopause, 71.6% of them experience sleep apnea.
Over 70%. That is just a wild statistic.
It is. It almost completely erases the gender gap, nearly matching the 83.8% prevalence in men.
And the mechanics behind it become so clear when you look at what happens to the muscle tissue itself.
Right. As estrogen drops, that genioglossus muscle physically loses its endurance.
Studies show a measurable shift in the muscle fiber composition, don't they?
Exactly. Without estrogen dictating the development, the muscle shifts away from those fatigue-resistant type I fibers toward easily fatigued type 2 fibers.
So the muscle literally gets too tired to hold the airway open and it just sags.
Yes, and it goes deeper than just the muscle fibers changing type.
What else happens?
When you lose that estrogen protection, a specific protein called hypoxia-inducible factor 1 alpha starts to accumulate.
Oh, the HIF-1 alpha protein.
Right. Normally it responds to low oxygen, but without estrogen to regulate it, it misfires. It builds up and changes how the muscle metabolizes energy, shifting toward rapid, fatigue-inducing glycolysis.
So the muscle is actively poisoning itself with fatigue. And at the exact same time, all that plumping hyaluronic acid we talked about, it breaks down.
It does. The tissues dry out, lose their firmness, and become highly susceptible to inflammation and swelling.
The airway is essentially losing its structural integrity from the inside out.
And to prove this is a direct hormonal link and not just, getting older surgical menopause provides a perfect model.
Right. If a woman has her ovaries removed, this airway collapse happens incredibly rapidly.
Exactly. It proves that the throat is entirely reliant on those specific ovarian hormones.
Wow. And we haven't even touched on the external changes. The drop in estrogen fundamentally alters how a woman's body distributes weight.
Yeah, even if the number on the scale doesn't change drastically, the loss of estrogen causes fat to accumulate around the abdomen and the neck.
And that visceral neck fat acts as an external weight, physically narrowing the airway from the outside in.
It's a compounding issue. You have internal tissue degradation, muscle fatigue, loss of neurological drive, and external pressure.
I was trying to think of a way to picture this, and it's basically like a camping tent.
Okay, I can see where you're going with this.
Yeah, so the poles holding the tent up suddenly get weaker. That's the loss of the muscle tone. The wind stops inflating the tent from the inside. That's the loss of the progesterone breathing drive.
Right.
And then someone throws a heavy, wet blanket right on top of the tent. That's the neck fat. Of course, the tent is going to collapse.
That is a brilliant analogy. It perfectly illustrates a multi-system mechanical breakdown. It is the perfect storm for obstructive sleep apnea.
Which brings us to a massive, glaring contradiction. If the physical collapse of the airway is this severe, why are over 90% of menopausal sleep apnea cases undiagnosed?
It's incredibly frustrating. It's because the medical community has been heavily conditioned to look for sleep apnea exclusively through a male lens.
Right. We are looking for male symptoms in female bodies. When we think of sleep apnea, we think of loud, window-rattling snoring.
The visible gasping for air where the partner literally has to elbow them to get them to start breathing again.
Exactly. But a woman's physiology means her symptoms present entirely differently. Her snoring is often significantly quieter.
And much less intense. Her airway might not be fully blocked, but partially restricted, which is a condition known as upper airway resistance syndrome, or URS.
So she isn't waking the whole house up. She's breathing through a collapsed airway, which is like trying to breathe through a cocktail straw all night.
Right. Her partner might not even notice she's struggling.
So instead of the classic gasping, what is she actually complaining to her doctor about?
If you look at the clinical data, women overwhelmingly report daytime fatigue, severe insomnia, morning headaches, brain fog, and mood changes like depression or anxiety.
And here is the trap, the overlap trap. Look at that list again. Fatigue, insomnia, headaches, brain fog. What does that sound like?
It sounds exactly like what society considers normal menopausal complaints.
Exactly. The clinician hears fatigue and brain fog in a 52-year-old woman and immediately stops looking for mechanical breathing issues.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the danger here is immense. This misdiagnosis leads to severe cardiovascular consequences, insulin resistance, and hypertension.
And it all just gets dismissed as getting older. But wait, here's where it gets really interesting. What about night sweats?
Oh, this is a major realization.
Right. I always thought night sweats were just hot flashes that happen to occur at night. Just a temperature regulation glitch.
A lot of people think that. But the sources reveal that a night sweat is frequently the body's panic response to suffocating.
That is terrifying.
The physiological cascade is intense. When your airway collapses, your oxygen drops. Your brain realizes you are choking and panics.
So it triggers a massive fight-or-flight response to save your life.
Exactly. It dumps a huge wave of cortisol and adrenaline directly into your bloodstream to shock your nervous system awake.
And what happens when you get a sudden spike of adrenaline? You sweat profusely, your heart races, and you feel incredibly anxious.
Right. And then, because your nervous system is flooded with stress hormones, you cannot simply fall back asleep.
So you lie there, drenched in sweat. You go to your doctor the next day and say, I have terrible insomnia and intense night sweats.
And the doctor says, classic menopause. Here is a prescription for sleeping pills.
Are we basically gaslighting women? Are doctors telling them they're just going through a rough menopausal transition when they're actually fighting for oxygen every single night?
Unfortunately, the data suggests this happens constantly, and giving a woman sleeping pills for this kind of insomnia can actually make the apnea much worse.
Because sedatives further relax those already weakened airway muscles, right?
Yes, making the collapse even more severe.
Okay, so we've uncovered the hidden mechanics of this airway collapse, and we know exactly why it's being missed. How do we rebuild the scaffolding?
Rebuilding it requires looking at both the chemical and mechanical angles. The most direct approach is hormone replacement therapy, or HRT.
Which makes logical sense. If the loss of estrogen and progesterone caused the problem, put them back into the system.
Right. Several studies show that HRT, specifically a combination of estriadol and progesterone, can significantly reduce the apnea-hypopnea index.
It restores the muscle tone and re-engages that vital central respiratory drive in the brainstem.
Exactly. But the clinical guidelines from the British Menopause Society are careful to note that HRT isn't a magic bullet for everyone.
Right, the data can be mixed depending on when the therapy started, and it has to be highly individualized.
Yes, a lot of women cannot take systemic hormones due to cardiovascular histories or breast cancer risk profiles.
Which is where the research gets incredibly innovative. For those who cannot use traditional HRT, the Frontier study focuses heavily on phytoestrogens.
Specifically, a plant-derived compound called genistein.
I was fascinated by this part. It's derived from plants like soybeans, and it has estrogen-like bioactivity without the same toxic risks. But how does a plant compound protect an airway muscle?
In animal models, genistein remarkably improved airway muscle endurance and aggressively reduced oxidative stress in the throat tissues.
And it does this through non-genomic pathways, right?
Yes, what is groundbreaking is that it operates non-genomically.
Okay, break that down for me. Does that mean it works without needing to act like a traditional hormone?
Generally, a traditional genomic hormone acts like a key in a lock. It goes inside the cell nucleus, binds to the DNA, and alters gene expression.
Which can take hours or days to show effects.
Right, but genistein bypasses the nucleus entirely. It interacts with enzymes and proteins right at the cell surface.
So it acts almost instantly, like a biochemical shield.
Exactly. Soaking up oxidative stress before it can damage the tissue and preventing that fatigue-inducing HIF-1 alpha protein from accumulating.
That is a massive breakthrough for women who can't use standard estrogen therapy.
It really is. But we also have to address the mechanical fixes, because continuous positive airway pressure, or CPAP therapy, remains the absolute gold standard.
Right. A CPAP machine acts as a pneumatic splint. It uses pressurized air to physically force the airway open from the inside,
Completely compensating for the lack of muscle tone and the external weight of neck fat. And lifestyle interventions play a huge role, too.
like adopting a Mediterranean diet or utilizing positional therapy to avoid sleeping flat on your back.
This raises an important question, though, about holistic treatment.
Oh,
Treating the hormones might cure the initial insomnia and restore the neurological drive. But if the airway has already undergone years of structural changes, hormones won't be enough.
so what does this all mean? If a CPAP is a mechanical splint for the throat, is HRT essentially a chemical splint? Does a woman need both, or can one replace the other?
Treating this requires a deeply holistic approach. Often, they work best when layered together. You cannot just fix the chemistry if the mechanics are broken.
And you cannot just prop up the mechanics with a machine if the chemical drive to breathe in the brainstem is gone.
Exactly. They interact in a continuous positive feedback loop. Fixing the breathing drops nighttime cortisol, which reduces stress, which makes it easier to lose visceral neck weight.
You have to treat the whole patient.
Yes, which is the exact opposite of the negative feedback loop of misdiagnosis we talked about earlier.
We have covered a vast amount of ground today. The main takeaway for you, listening right now, is that your airway is deeply connected to your hormones.
Right. Snoring, crippling insomnia, and waking up exhausted are not just inevitable signs of aging.
They're vital distress signals.
Yo.
They're your body's alarm system telling you that the hormonal scaffolding of your airway is shifting.
And your brain is fighting a nightly battle to keep you breathing.
Exactly. And that means you have power here. If you are in midlife and struggling with fragmented sleep or persistent fatigue, advocating for a sleep study could be one of the most important preventative health measures you ever take.
Don't let a clinician dismiss your exhaustion. Modern at-home sleep studies are incredibly accessible now.
Investigating this is about protecting your long-term cardiovascular health and reclaiming your daily quality of life. Before we wrap up, though, I want to leave you with a brand new concept to ponder.
Okay, what is it?
Since we now know definitively that the genioglossus muscle in your throat is uniquely packed with estrogen receptor alpha, could the future of sleep apnea treatment involve an inhaler?
Oh, wow. That is an incredibly compelling thought.
Yeah.
Localized, targeted delivery.
Right. Imagine an inhaler or a localized throat spray that delivers estrogen only to the throat muscles.
Imagine curing sleep apnea by chemically targeting just the airway tissue, completely bypassing the bloodstream.
Avoiding systemic hormone therapy entirely. You get the scaffolding back exactly where you need it, restoring the muscle's endurance with zero risk to the rest of the body.
The clinical science is certainly paving the way for that kind of targeted intervention. Once you recognize that the airway is a dynamic, hormone-responsive organ, entirely new treatment paradigms open up.
And once you see it that way, those murky diagnostic waters suddenly become crystal clear. You finally get that clean, binary X-ray we talked about at the very beginning.
It's not just a bad night's sleep, it's a structural chemical shift.
And a structural shift is something you can actually fix. Stay curious, keep asking the hard questions, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.